Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Southeast Media Sunrise, dedicated to giving a voice to authors of all genres. I'm your host, Jodi Hockinson. Joining us remotely by phone today is Dr. Michael Nelson, pen name Michale Deeze, author of Bless Me, Father and For I Have Sinned, along with his third and final book in the Emmett Casey Chronicles, The Heretic, in bookstores soon. Named one of the most exciting independent writers for 2018 by Indie Authors magazine for his short stories, Michale Deeze has written 2 novels, Forgive Me, Father and For I Have Sinned, and his third book, The Heretic, has recently been sent to the publisher. Forced into retirement last spring after a quadruple bypass, he is a physician, veteran, son, and father. Now residing in the Rockford, Illinois area, Mike spent decades living near the forests of northern Wisconsin. He has visited every state in the Union and worked on 5 of the 7 continents of the world. He is also creating the Legacy Project, aimed at showing people how important their own life stories are and teaching them how to produce their own legacy by creating an oral history of their life experiences. Welcome, Mike, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, hello to you, and thank you for having me.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about your second book, For I Have Sinned. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
The second book is a continuation of the first book. It details the interplay between a father and a son who have trouble communicating with each other, mostly because they're so much alike. The father wishes, of course, that the son had turned out differently, and the son shares that feeling, but at the same time admires his father above all other people. So they are constantly at odds with each other until they realize that they need each other.
So your book, For I Have Sinned, is your second one. By their titles, these sound like these would be rooted in faith, in religion. But according to the genres they're listed in, that's not the case. So can you clarify for the listeners why you chose those particular titles?
Absolutely. The first book, For Bless Me, Father, and the second book, For I Have Sinned, are the openings that one would do if they were Catholic and going to confession. That's the first 2 sentences that you say when you go to confession as a Catholic. And the story itself is rooted in this Irish Catholic dogmatic religion where they have so much guilt and shame with almost anything that they do that isn't straightforward and honest and everything else. And these 2 people, primarily the father and the son in the book, but mostly the son, has a lot of guilt. He walks on both sides of the law and spends way too much time on the wrong side of the law. So when you go to confession, you start out, Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. And so the first book details some of the transgressions, and the second book parallels the father's transgressions as well. And it is, in the end, what brings the 2 of them together.
So your 2 books are 488 and 410 pages, respectively. That's a lot of writing. They were released a month apart. So when did you do all that writing, and how long did it take?
It actually took me about 3 years. I started writing it after my first health crisis. I am a 100% disabled veteran as a result of my time in Southeast Asia back in the early 70s. And so over the course of the last 50 years, I've had increasing difficulty with being able to work full-time and having time off, so to speak. I started writing about 3-4 years ago now, and it started out as just trying to document some of my own life experiences so that I could show my children that I was more than just dad. And having come to fatherhood relatively late in life, I was in my mid-30s before I married, had another life before that time. And so they thought that I was kind of a strange duck to begin with. But I thought it was important for them to know why. And I started writing small things, small chapters here and there that I could share with them farther down the road. And it started to develop into this sort of linear storyline. So I created a fictitious character, and I brought more input from other people that I spoke with about those times, and it became a story that had continuity. And so it became very easy to write it. The first book, I was done with both of them at about the same time. But as you can see, it was almost 900 pages by that time. And I broke it up into two, sent it off to an editor, and they were delighted with it and said, let's break it up, let's cut it here, and then let's make it into a 2-volume set. And oh, by the way, don't let it end there. Give us another one.
So have your children read your books yet?
Yes, they have. My son's comment was, wow, this was a little close to the bone, but hardly anybody will notice it.
That sounds like a supreme compliment.
I took it as such. There are parts of it that are, exciting. There's a lot of emotion in it, and a lot of sorrow and grit. There are some pretty raw spots in it.
So, did your father serve in World War II?
My father was a tail gunner on a B-17 Flying Fortress and flew 26 missions over Europe during the war. And the life expectancy of a tail gunner on those missions was 5. And the life expectancy of an entire 10-man crew was only 10.
Holy cow.
And he flew 26.
So there are a lot of parallels between your father and yourself and these books.
Yes. My father was emotionally distant my whole life, and he was hard to get to. And most of the time when we did have time together, it was more like friends than it was like family, because he just couldn't seem to connect. Near the end of his life, he descended into dementia. And when it began to seem obvious that he was having issues, he gave me his diary. And the diary was a handwritten account of every mission that he flew. And he not only had the story written, but it was written, it was documentary. Target today, Vienna, in the air 7 hours, 52 minutes, lost both waist gunners. Came in, landing gear wouldn't go down, had to belly in. And it was so raw and so stark that it just stood the hair right on the back of your neck, right up. And it made me understand why he couldn't form emotional connections, because everybody that he knew didn't come home.
Oh.
And so I began to realize that was my own personal problem too, after my experiences in the jungles. And I began to see that if I had had that diary when we were younger, I might not have appreciated it completely, but I would have understood the man a lot better. So that was my motivation for starting to write.
You're creating the Legacy Project. Can you tell listeners about what that is?
Absolutely. I'm right now currently doing a lecture series, and I'm working mostly with seniors at various retirement villages and places like that, trying to bring the message that that their story is important. And not just the stories that we tell about, how Aunt May had too much wine at Thanksgiving dinner, or I remember the one time when the dog ran away and two came back, or, those kind of family stories are amusing and things like that. But there's stories behind the stories that make the person who they are. And we very rarely tell those stories because they're close, and we have an emotional tie to it, and we're embarrassed to share it because we can't be sure that people are interested. But those stories are absolutely essential because those are the stories that are our legacy, as opposed to our heritage. Our heritage, of course, is, I'm Irish Catholic, and my mother was from County Clare. That's my heritage. And so, we have St. Patrick's Day mandatory dinners, and those are your heritage. But your legacy is the thing that you use to educate the generation. It's literally the difference between accumulated knowledge and passed on wisdom. So they're not the same thing at all, but the two go together because the legacy that we give teaches us how to use our knowledge. And so it's so important for these people to leave this legacy behind so that there can be an understanding and so that, we can be proud of what we know, who we are, and how we got here, but also how we can use that to move on.
So is the author of Bless Me, Father, and For I Have Sinned, and of course The Heretic coming soon, what is the connection between these three books that you've written and the legacy project that you've created?
Well, in a way, the three books are my legacy. And I hope to think that it's not the end of my legacy, but it's a beginning of the legacy that was brought to point with my father's diary, and the substance and depth of his character is there, and it isn't just this is how you change a tire, or this is how you change the oil in your car. It's this is who I am, and so the book itself is it's who I am in a fictionalized sort of way, obviously, and I'm not all heroic and everything else like the character in this book is on occasion, or the incorrigible criminal that he is on occasion. I mean, there's a little of all of that in all of us, I'm sure. But the story is also the fact that I wrote it, that I created it, and here's something that I did. My children, I, as a physician, I practiced for 36 years in Wisconsin, in northern Wisconsin, in a very rural environment where about 80% of my patients were Amish. And that required that I was on house calls 3 days a week because they just couldn't, come to town as easily as they could, especially if they were in need of health care. So we traveled a lot. I was not home a lot. I occasionally took the kids with me, but most of the time I was out. And so here's a way of them, it's great having your father for a doctor, and my daughter was home for college just last week from college for the holidays, and she was getting ready to go back, and the girls were collecting her things, and we were talking, and one of the girls looked at me and she said, "Wow, you sure know a lot of stuff." And my daughter looked at her and said, "Yeah, he knows a lot of stuff, but he's wiser too." And I thought, well, spot on, girl.
Yeah. So, what made you choose the pen name Michale Deeze?
That's a cute little story, I think, and it's one that I kind of like. My mother always called me Michael D because my middle initial is D for Dennis. And so she called me Michael D. And in fact, when I was in the service, all of the people that were part of my squad also called me Michael D. So when she heard that I had my first book done, she was telling everybody, Michael D has a book out. Michael D's got a book. And so just before the first one came out, she passed away. And so I changed it from Michael Nelson to Michale Deeze because these are Michael D's books.
Aw, what a nice tribute to your mother.
Right. And I think she would have been very proud of them.
Very nice. So you were named one of the most exciting independent writers for 2018 by Indie Authors magazine. Before you ever wrote the first word of your book, could you have ever imagined that you'd not only get that kind of recognition, but be to the point where you'd be moving towards having a third book published?
No, I really didn't. And to tell you the truth, I was a terrible English student. I didn't understand the purpose of it at all. I thought it was all pretty silly. But I always liked to write or to read. And when I started writing this, I suddenly discovered that I really kind of liked it and that I had the ability to write down what I could see in my mind's eye. And it was so much fun and such an emotional experience for me. And so, to be honest with you, the work of the book was not with a book as the end point. It was actually the joy of just doing the writing. And so, I actually will put one of these books in my hands, and it's like, holy cow, that has nothing to do with how much fun it was to write it.
Well, it looks like we're out of time. Anyone interested in purchasing this book can log into semediapro.com or visit amazon.com. These books are available on Kindle and in paperback. You can also visit michaeldeezebooks.com, that's Deeze, for more information and to read his blog. And that was Dr. Michael Nelson, pen name Michael Deeze, author of Bless Me, Father, and For I Have Sinned, along with his third book coming soon, The Heretic. Thanks again for joining us today, Mike.
Thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And listeners, if you're interested in getting your book published, please visit us at semediapro.com and click on the book publishing link. This is Jodi Hockinson, host of Southeast Media Sunrise, Southeast Media Productions. Like us on Facebook at Southeast Media Productions or visit our website at semediapro.com.